Well, good morning. We have another My Social Canvas Spring 2022 internship mentorship workshop happening this morning. And I'm so glad that you can all join us. These workshops have been so much fun, really getting a chance to look back behind the curtain a little in different areas and different fields with different role models who have had incredible journeys, and just getting a little bit more insight into some of these finished products, some of the things that you look up to and think, wow, that's amazing. We are really excited to be able to show you some of those very practical, very sometimes not glamorous steps that have led up to those moments that you look to and think, oh, wow, how awesome is that? So today you're in for a real treat for all of you with that entrepreneurial spirit, and all of you who have that dream or idea or invention, whatever it is in your heart that you would love to see come to life. You will get to hear today from Jessica, who has done that very thing, who is an incredible powerhouse. She has taken an idea, a concept, and really carried that through to fruition, right through to the screens at QVC and more. You'll hear her story, but we are just really excited. So just a little bit, Jessica, about this cohort. We have a spring cohort of young women from the My Social Canvas community who are doing a internship slash mentorship with us for this spring season, and we are just pouring in as much as we can, just opportunities and learning times and connections and networking, and really just trying to equip and empower and enable these incredible young Gen Z women and girls to be all that they dream they can be, and to design the career and the life that they love. So we are honored to have you to be part of this program and to come in this way and really take your time to share your wisdom, to share your insights, to share some of your experience. And I am confident that our community are going to love you, love this time, and really walk away with just increased inspiration, encouragement, and really next steps and go-tos of what they can do from here. So Jessica, welcome. I'd love if you could
Thank you.
just introduce yourself and just share some of what is on your heart today to share with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm a powerhouse in your introduction. That's super
Yes.
cool. I am an entrepreneur. I am part of being an entrepreneur. It's like a recipe. You need to have passion, persistence, and a little bit of crazy. So I hopefully try and encapsulate that in all that I do every day. But thank you for having me. And I love the whole organization that is behind you and the participants that are in it. I can't even imagine what I would be or how much I'd be able to do if I started out at such a young age, having the support network and the inspiration and motivation that just kind of, and the mentorship that is bolstering all of the people that have the honor to be in your cohorts, many cohorts.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes. And, all the best people have a bit of crazy in them. So I'm glad we're in good company.
Yay. Okay, great. Well, yep, I am the creator of a wearable blanket called the Throwbie. It is something that it wasn't even my first idea or my first creation, but it is the one that I felt really stuck and was going to penetrate the market to all households, men, women, children of all ages. And I really felt like I had something. You kind of get that feeling inside where it's like, this is the one. But I have been on QVC for a number of years. My product has appeared on the Today Show. And all of this is strange to say when I hear myself say it, because I'm just a girl from a small town in upstate New York. like there's nothing that, had prepared me for this type of success. I will call it success because I definitely recognize that I have achieved things that people in the inventor space only dream of achieving, to be on QVC and to have your product out there in retail stores, big box and such. So I'm very grateful. I'm very thankful. And I feel that where I came from had a lot to do with how I pushed forward. So a lot of the slides that we'll talk about here, because I do want to make sure that this isn't just about me, that it's educational and people walk away with, a little bit of a toolkit or an understanding of, the good, the bad, and the ugly in being an inventor and an entrepreneur. And I say or because you don't have to do it all. But being from a small town in upstate New York, everyone knew each other. Everyone knew each other's families. It was very tightly knit, multi-generational. So it wouldn't be absurd to see my friend Brian's grandmother, walking in town and say hello to her. There was very little intimidation of speaking to older people and, being amongst large groups of people that had all ages and generations. So I think that helped me when I got into the corporate world. I was very unintimidated, if that's a word, I'll just put it together, to speak to executives and upper management. Even though I had just started in like the most starting position you could start in, I had no problem having a conversation with the executive vice presidents or to tell them, what I thought, or maybe have a recommendation from the view of, the newbie or, the little rookie on the block. So I feel that the more that you can drop the barriers and overcome fear in talking to people, the farther you'll get in being able to tell your story or sell your product or ask for that promotion. So my upbringing, I feel, had a lot to do with where I went, even in my corporate career. And after college, I actually did start in corporate. I was in corporate for about 10 years before I started anything with these ideas. These ideas and inventions, innovations, they were just written in a notebook. I wasn't pursuing anything. I was just pursuing my corporate career. I changed my major in college like 3 times. I was going to be a doctor, then I was going to be a lawyer, and then I focused on business management information systems. So it was kind of a combination of marketing and computers at the same time. But that being said, having the flexibility to change who I wanted to be, and I think I wanted to be those things based upon the TV shows I was watching at the time. So I watched a lot of medical shows. I watched a lot of lawyer shows. But having the flexibility to make those discoveries and to get my feet wet in a couple of different areas really gave me a bit of an overview of the lay of the land out there in terms of maybe what's possible for careers. But then going to corporate and being amongst people who were super smart, and it was a large bank, it was JP Morgan Chase, tons of resources, lots of technical people and business people and marketing people and executives and assistants. And there was the whole range of people that I was able to learn from. So I've always kind of been a sponge, and I wanted to learn what the assistant was doing and, what the executive did on a day-to-day basis up there in the cool offices. And I would just always try and learn from everyone, even though I kind of had my own job to do. And I learned etiquette. I learned professionalism, which is something that, people need to kind of cut your teeth on a good first step into professionalism, into the business world, because people do want to, be an entrepreneur and just come out of the gate running and say, I have a great product. But there is a little bit of finesse, a little bit of etiquette, a little bit of presentation, how you carry yourself, what you wear, what you say. And I feel like that was also a very good foundation working in corporate for me to kind of build upon, to then be able to speak to other professionals when I did create a product. And I was like, hey, I'm here. I've been where you are, because you're on the corporate side. You're in the retail, you're a buyer. And I know how to talk the talk and walk the walk. And I created a very cool product that you really should see. And here are the benefits. So opening yourself up to these experiences and making sure that you have many jobs, wear many hats, really can prepare you for future entrepreneurship. I know, like I said, a lot of people want to jump right out there and be a huge Instagram influencer or an entrepreneur and carry the entrepreneur title. But there's a lot that goes into preparing to even being able to run your own business and being a business owner. So that was just a little bit about the kind of how I got there. And I kind of created my first product out of necessity. So a lot of inventions are born out of necessity. And when I left corporate, my daughter was just born. It was actually after maternity leave. I never went back. So I had 2 kids at home, and I decided to raise my kids. And being at home, the gears didn't stop turning. I was continuously thinking of new ways to make new things or other things better, whether it was a baby product I was using, or it was, something else around the house that I had a better view of the utility of it and the user experience of it. And I'm like, this could be so much better. Even a stapler. Have you looked at a stapler lately? It is
I haven't.
Oh my gosh. It is still like a metal thing that comes in and 2 little legs that crunch in underneath. And when that thing gets stuck, you're just banging it on anything that you can in order to like loosen those jaws and have it work.
Yeah.
The stapler is so ready for a reinvention. Please, someone take that and run with it.
There we are. My social canvas community. There's the challenge. Who can revolutionize the stapler? Jessica just put it out there.
Oh my gosh. I think you do have your final assignment for this cohort.
There it is. Yeah.
So when my kid was playing baseball, the wind would whip through, because we are in New Jersey and baseball season starts in the spring, but it's kind of the tail end of the winter. So it's freaking freezing. The wind would whip through the stands, and everyone would be taking their little throw blanket and kind of like wrapping it around themselves. And once they have their hands, with that, then they can't drink coffee or, clap for their kid who just scored a run. So I was like, there needs to be something better. And I went home and that's when I created, and I'm wearing it right now, which is why I'm putting my hands on myself. I'm wearing my Throwbie blanket poncho. I actually created the Throwbie at that moment because we needed something to cover us front and back, and so we could clap, and so we can, drink our coffee and talk to each other with hand gestures, which I seem to be doing so often. But, this all started with an idea and a giant pair of scissors and a roll of duct tape. And wow. It was born out of necessity, like I said.
It's amazing. I love always hearing that Genesis moment of when was that light bulb kind of idea of hang on. And obviously you're wired that way and always seeing the world that way, but this is a very, very real situation that you find yourself in, freezing on a sporting field. So I love that.
Yes, it is. And this was not even like the first time that this aha moment had come to me in a very real way. So back in 2010, I created a bathrobe where the sleeves come off and the bottom comes off. So it transforms itself from a full, comfy, your favorite robe into a sleeveless shorty. Because you
Nice.
wear your robe and it's great for 5 minutes and then you're just sweating. You're like, okay, I'm so warm now in my robe that I have to start taking things off. But this way you can just pop the sleeves off and pop the bottom off and you're still in the comfort, like your core is still in that comfort zone. And I remember the aha moment that I had with that was, again, my giant scissor and my roll of duct tape upstairs. And I cut my robe, a robe that I actually got for my wedding like 15 years ago. It really was my most favorite robe. And I cut the bottom off and I cut the sleeves off and then I duct taped them back together into this little Frankenstein contraption, which I still have, of course, because it was my first prototype. And I ran downstairs and I grabbed the New York Times, because we had been getting the New York Times at that time. I don't even know if newspapers still exist, which is weird. And I told my husband, I'm like, take a picture of me, because I needed the date from the newspaper. I was like, take a picture of me from all angles so I can record this and no one steals my invention. So the moment that the creation and the prototype, the Frankenstein prototype, came about, I had to preserve it. I had to memorialize it at that moment, that this was mine on this date. And then the paranoia sets in. It's like, who can I tell about this? And how are they not going to create it themselves? So that's when I knew I was now an inventor or an innovator, or, because you have that moment of paranoia. I mean, I even made my parents sign NDAs, which are non-disclosure agreements, and
Yes.
Photo releases where if I took a picture of them, I can, use it. So all of a sudden remember I used to watch all those legal TV shows.
Of course. Yes. They come in handy. Yes.
Oh gosh, my lawyer brain kicked in at that moment and took over. But yeah, so I don't know if I should maybe start talking about some of the slides, or if I should kind of keep going on some of the ways that I ended up getting my product known and seen and on QVC. Maybe I'll just jump into a couple of slides.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds great. However way you'd like to go. We'd love to hear both. Some of the process and also some of that exciting story.
Okay, great. Well, some of it is actually buried in some of these practical, typical ways of doing business. So I wanted to make sure that people know all sides of what it actually means to be an inventor, to be an entrepreneur, to run your business. Running your business is very different than just being an inventor. And I actually progressed one slide ahead. I don't know why it didn't look that way on your end. Does it look? Oh, there it is.
Here we are. Okay.
Yep. So there's a couple of ways to differentiate these roles, and knowing the difference can help where you fit into the mix. Not everyone that comes up with an idea is going to end up to that entrepreneurial stage where they do run their own business. So an inventor is someone who creates a new product that has never been made before, whereby an innovator, the next one, is actually someone who makes a remarkable improvement on an existing product. So for example, when the iPhone was invented, or a smartphone, we'll say, that product never existed before. The whole concept of this smartphone was born out of someone's invention. And then the next versions of it, the improvement of it, the adding another aspect to it, that's an innovation. That's basically, the wheel was invented and then people continued to make it better.
So our stapler is going to be an innovation.
It is going to be an innovation. Yes.
Okay.
I can't wait for that project.
Okay, good.
Unless you create an entirely different way to fasten pages together, which don't even resemble the stapler, then that might be an invention at that point. But yes, I totally wait for the innovator that comes in and improves the stapler as it is. And then the entrepreneur side of things is when you really take a product that has been either invented or innovated or actually just might be in existence. You know, an entrepreneur can sell anything. It's kind of like opening up shop and starting to sell something. It's almost kind of like what we used to call small businesses when you open up a small business, but an entrepreneur really is kind of, it's a catchier name. It's a pizzazz title. It means that you're on the cutting edge and new media and all that fun stuff. But your goal is to really bring this product or service to people, to your customers, to sell it to end users, or to sell it to, you know, the intermediaries who will end up putting it in the hands of end users. And an entrepreneur is kind of like known to run a small shop, to stay lean, to wear many hats. And oh my gosh, if I can show you the closet of hats that I wear, I'm just going to say that it is inventor, innovator, bookkeeper, email marketer, phone call maker to tell people about my product, or firefighter to put out fires. You really have to, when I said about that sponge side of things, you have to try and absorb everything about the business and every way it's done. If it is legal, if it is financial, if it is making sure you keep your numbers, you know, making sure you know your product, know your customer. So it is every facet that you can think about. I'm the IT support. Sometimes I actually turn to my kids for IT support.
Yes, they're very resourceful that way.
Yeah.
Children,
absolutely,
they're very resourceful.
They are. They very much are. I send my parents, like my dad will call me for something. I'm like, you're just going to have to call Ben, or I'll put my daughter on the phone. So knowing yourself and where you fit in is definitely a bonus, because you can be an inventor, and you may need to find a friend or find someone who is the entrepreneur side of things if you want to see like your company move in that direction.
Okay.
So I just changed the slide here. And again, it's like, do you see it on your end? It's still the inventor. There it is. Okay.
It's changed now. Yeah.
It's got to be like a 20-second delay over here. Well, where are you? In New York? And I'm in New Jersey. So it must be that whole continental divide that happens.
Yeah. The Hudson River, you know.
Okay. So creating a product from an idea, the fundamentals of creating a product from an idea is to make sure that you, and you know, you should be writing all this stuff down. And speaking of writing things down, journal your journey. No matter if you succeed or not, it is always fun to look back and see where you started, especially if you are planning on taking this, you know, in a direction, or spending more than, you know, a month thinking about something like this. You wanna know where you came from and like what you've accomplished, because you do lose sight of it when you're down the road. You're like, how did I get here? What have been my successes, and what have been my failures, and what have I learned? And sometimes the failures stick with you a lot easier than the successes. So writing stuff down really can bring it back home to you and give yourself that pat on the back and be like, look, you've done a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
So fundamentally, creating a product from an idea includes defining it. The sooner that you're able to hone in and decide what it is you're trying to create, or the market that you're trying to serve by creating this, is good to have on paper. Because like I said, you do lose sight of things. It's good to come back and be like, why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? It's almost the who, what, when, why, how, and there's a couple more questions in there that you can answer yourself. And then you test it. You put it together like with duct tape and scissors, and you go into testing. You throw it towards your husband, you throw it towards your boyfriend or your friends, and you say, you know, is this something that you think that you would use? Is this something that you think anyone would use? Should it be this? Should it be that? Even for me, when I was designing the Throwbie, I have friends that have various size heads. Like the noggin is definitely not a one size fits all. So I had to make sure that the opening where you kind of toss it over your head is appropriate for people who have little heads and people who have giant noggins. Thankfully, my husband is one of those people that have a big head. So I would look around and find the person who I felt had the largest head. And then I would say, do you mind if I toss this over your head for a sec? Remember, a little bit crazy is a necessity.
All in the name of research. All in the name of research.
Exactly. All in the name of research. And once you've tested it, you will be going back to the defining part of it, and you will be going back to make iterations of modifications to see if what you have is the bestest version so far. And then you can go into a prototype stage of designing it and actually, kind of making it a little bit more finalized. Now, the next stage on the bottom called Brand It, that was one of the more difficult things that I had to do. There were a bunch of names for the Throwbie blanket poncho that were in the running. I wanted it to sound short and cute and similar to the other wearable blanket that was in the market, because people were used to saying that, but I wanted mine to be the household name. So it kind of had to have the same rhythm and syllables and such. And I also was trying to differentiate it from the name brand of my company as well, just in case these two things parted ways. And if I sold my brand, if I sold the Throwbie, I did not want that to be so tightly knit into the name of my company, which was called Kona Benelli at the time. Just a little side note, Kona was my golden retriever who was by my side all the time in the kitchen when I was coming up with my crazy ideas. And so that Kona, it was a no-brainer for me for her being the first namesake. And then Ben is my son and Ellie is my daughter. So the name Kona Benelli was really meaningful to naming my company that, because that was one of my whys, is I was doing it for my family. Yeah. And plus the rhythm again of Kona Benelli was similar to my favorite designer, who was Norma Kamali. She still is. And so it had a very similar tone and a very similar rhythm. Norma Kamali, Kona Benelli.
Yes, it just flows. Yeah,
it does flow. But the branding aspect, and the reason why it's kind of encapsulated at the bottom, is you can spend an entire year thinking of the right brand for whether it's your company or your product, and trying to position it and making sure that the social media names are there and making sure that the name isn't taken in the patent and trademark directories. Because if you're creating a product, you're going to want to think big, and you're going to want to see it in your mind as something successful and something that penetrates the market and gets out there. And in order to do that, you have to start with doing your due diligence in the branding side of it, so that later down the road, when it's in the hands of hundreds of thousands and millions of people, you don't have to go rename it or get sued because you used someone else's name.
Yes.
So this definitely takes a lot of forethought. And you want to make sure that it communicates what you hope to have.
Yeah.
Then on the next side is funding it and protecting it. How much are you able to invest in your idea? And how much do you want to put into protecting the intellectual property versus going speed to market? That's always a big decision for a new product. Intellectual property, patents and such can be super expensive, and it is time consuming. So if you do have an innovative idea and you just want to jump in and get it out there, just even a regular patent could potentially cost $25,000. And that's if it's not, contested back and forth, and if the lawyer doesn't have to start writing responses to the patent office. It can get up there depending upon, how complex. So the funding it side of things is, how much do you have for inventory? For us, it was always make small batches, because if you want to add a pocket, if you want to design something slightly different, if the whole manufacturing run came out with a flaw, like keeping your budget tight intentionally is definitely the way to go, especially if it's your first time creating this product. If it's your first time out of the gate, you're going to want to refine it in future iterations. My first iteration of the Throwbee had buttons. Now it has magnetic snaps right here up on the collar area, so that when you put it back together as a blanket to lay on the couch or to, have a slumber party, it comes together. Instead of with buttons that you have to button, it's magnetic snaps. But that was in a future iteration. It also, a future iteration also added a pocket to put your stuff right in the front, like on a little kangaroo pouch. And then you once you make it, you sell it and launch it. And that's when you start picking up the phone, and you could start picking up the phone in any one of those stages and talk to people about it. If they sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, that's where the paranoia sets in, because sometimes people don't want to sign it, but sometimes you need to have them sign it in order to have the conversation so nobody runs away with your idea. But you tell them all the reasons. You tell them your story. You tell them why it's so important for them to have this, and what the benefits are to the customer, and how you came up with the idea as an entrepreneur, and how much it means, and what your why is. Yeah, your purpose, your passion, all of that stuff. And then you go back to square one, or you continue in these loops with the product development stage. I'm gonna hop. It'll take 20 seconds to go to that next slide. Do you have any questions about that whole creating a product from an idea?
No, that's great. I love all the different steps and the way that you've set that out, and the practical example of what that looked like for you. And as you said, these can be loops within the loop that just keep going, and there could be multiple things happening all at the one time in these processes as well. So it's great. I'm a huge advocate for journaling, so I love the idea of journaling each idea and where it's at and what the process is looking like. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. So the next slide features the supply chain, and this is actually a bit convoluted, so I don't want to rack your brain with this. It's basically making your product and getting it to where it needs to go. I'm going to flip to the next slide, which has it a little bit larger. Just to speak through it, and it's been in the news for a while now, the whole supply chain. Right when the pandemic had started, it was a little challenging for people to get goods from, especially ones that were coming in from outside of the country. I personally do my manufacturing overseas. I would love to make this in America, but producing it is 3 times more expensive producing it in America, and you have so few choices. There are basically no factories that are making soft goods, like blankets and throws and things. And if there are, there's like a handful of them. And it costs 3 times more. They get all of their material from China anyway. So making it here and doing the cutting, sewing here is like, well, you know what? Let me just make it overseas, and I'll, pull the container in, and that'll be it. So as an entrepreneur, I needed to understand the supply chain and the process of how that happens. And one of the reasons why, as an entrepreneur, a new business person, if you are importing or exporting or producing anywhere, you need to know if you're going to get ripped off. You need to be very protective of your funds, and you need to know, because when there are middlemen involved, not to say men versus women, when there are middle companies, middle people involved, everyone is looking to take a cut. And even when you're going to buy a car, If you buy a car for what the car salesman says, you're probably going to be paying the highest commission to that salesperson that you would if you were doing your homework and making sure to negotiate down and knowing your numbers beforehand before you walk through the door. So knowing the supply chain and how things happen really is in your benefit. I spoke with someone who does my importing. I found him through a friend. And I basically said, teach me everything that you know. Kind of give me the high level, if you would, of what happens when this happens, this whole importing. And I was so thankful that he's a talker. Like, he was that type of person that would talk your ear off for a while. I actually had him on my podcast. He's a great person. But he told me all about what happens and how things are imported. So this diagram that I found online does do a good job of depicting what happens. So just to kind of skirt through it, all the way on the left side are your raw materials. There's some trees, some rocks, some banging of things. That could be, for me, that could be where how this fabric is created. It's a poly plush, so it's a synthetic fabric. It doesn't necessarily come from trees and from natural materials, but maybe at some point it had before. But so you see at the top, it says tier 3 suppliers, and then tier 2 suppliers, tier 1 suppliers. So there's a chain that needs to happen. And if for some reason the supplies aren't available to even create the fabric, then it kind of messes with the progression of getting your product, because depending upon where the problems lie in any of this sequence, that could disrupt your supply chain. That's where supply chain kind of comes in. So it could be, so the raw materials happen, and then the item is kind of, the fabric is made and spooled, and then it's created as like long sheets of fabric that end up needing to get dyed into all the appropriate colors, or the pattern is put on. However they do it, the magic happens in those 3, sides of things. And then right before it gets packaged and everything, it does get cut and sewn. So the specifications that my factory uses to make these exactly how I want them, the size, remember that giant head hole for people with big noggins? All of that is based upon the specifications that I have provided them. And as far as technical writing goes and all of that, that's another entrepreneurial hat that you have to wear, because you can't have people in factories creating stuff that you haven't defined for them. So once everything does get created, it gets housed in a warehouse overseas. Again, for me, it's overseas. And then it gets picked up by a trucker to take it gets stuffed into a container, picked up by a trucker, taken to the port in China, put on a boat, and then makes its way over here. Now, currently the supply chain that we know of, where the backup is at the ports. There's a lot of containers sitting out there in the ocean that made that trip that I just described and are waiting to be unloaded. And for various reasons, there are multiple reasons. It's even from the truckers that don't have available trucks. It's, from employee backlogs. There's a lot of reasons why there's problems with the supply chain. So once everything does go through successfully and you get your container, you usually end up unloading your inventory now at whatever warehouse I have, or whatever warehouse whomever creates the product has. And then it starts getting distributed to the targets or the email marketing campaign. You're fulfilling it direct to consumer, and it starts getting closer into the hands of the customers, which is great. So that is the 5-minute overview of the supply chain. And again, you have to know what you're doing, and you have to make this a deep study. I spoke to you the other day about going into deep focus mode. That means for me, I turned off all of my social media. I turned off all of my, I turned my do not disturb setting on my phone. And I really kind of hunkered down. Normally I have a podcast in my ears or a Twitter Spaces or something. And I really went dark. I went into deep focus. There was something I had to accomplish, and it just made me better for doing that.
Yeah.
So then we have the product life cycle. And this is something to talk about because someone may end up getting dismayed in the end because you create a product. It was a fantastic product. And then all of a sudden now there's like a downturn and you're like, what's going on? Why don't people like this anymore? Why don't they need this anymore? This is a typical thing that happens to all products, basically all products. Your product is created. So there's like the inception stage, we'll call the introduction over here. And then you're starting to spread the news. You're starting to, to market it and get it in the hands of people. And then you'll see a rapid growth stage where things are going up, up, and up, and you're penetrating the market. People are loving your product. It's flying off the shelves, and you're having a really great run. And then there's a stage, and this could be a very quick thing, which is called a fad. Sometimes products are just fads. And then like silly bands. My kids used to have those things that are silly bands. They used to be like a little elastic shaped like animals and shaped like baseball players. That was quick. That was a fad. So that has a steep, your product may have a steep time where it's like being great. And then as it approaches that next blue stage, that's called product maturity. That's when demand starts to slow. People have already bought it and they don't need to buy it again. They bought it for all their friends and family last year for Christmas or Hanukkah. And your product it could have been knocked off. At that time, there could have been imitators that came out and what is that phrase? Imitation is the something form of flattery, the best form of flattery.
Yeah, imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Yeah. When knockoffs come out, it's really, really deflating for the inventor and the creator. Yeah. But that is kind of the go-ahead to create something new. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I did a good job because the knockoffs have come out and they're pretty identical to mine. So way to go. Yay. I created something super cool. Yeah. And then you have the decline. And the decline is, like I said, when you decide to create that next new product or you decide to pivot and go in a different direction or, you know.
Yeah.
And the decline could actually be, it doesn't necessarily even need to be that level of steepness. The decline may also end up being flat, where you've created a product out in the market that people may or may not buy every now and then, and you might be fine with that. It's, it's some sort of steady rate of income and that's fine. So then the next thing that I just wanted to touch on, and this is like just super standard to every business. There's three main resources in every business. There's money, people, and time. And they all have a very different relationship to each other. If you want to accomplish a task in a shorter amount of time, you bring in more people to do it, but it'll cost you more money. Or if you have a lot of time, you may need less people to do it, and it may cost you more money. I mean, it may cost you less money to do that if time is on your side. And these diagrams kind of show a lot of different relationships to how that happens. But when you are running your business, if time to market is essential, or if all of a sudden people bought your product and you have so many orders to fulfill and it's only you because you're the entrepreneur. You made 10,000 pieces over in China and they arrived and you're ready to go. And all of a sudden you were on the Today Show. And now you're like, oh my God, I just got 8,000 orders that came in. How am I going to do this? I'm one person. And I know it takes me, a minute and a half to wrap and pack each bag. No joke, that happened. And totally happened. I called in my friend Kristen. I got my husband on board. I'm like, here's the assembly line. And we set up tables in the dining room. And I'm like, okay, I'll label, you guys just pack and do this, because as a control freak, I needed to be in charge of that, making sure that the product matched the thing before I slapped the label on to get it out. So control freak is also another entrepreneurial trait. So yeah, I called in everyone that I could. Just another side story, which was pretty super funny. I had created a pet blanket, which was just a standard blanket that had our name on it and an embroidered pet paw. And I sold it into all of our local ShopRites here in New Jersey. So it must have been in about 18, 20 stores, just kind of like in the New Jersey area. And then our blanket, and my inventory was low at that point because I fulfilled the order and they had most of the inventory in their ShopRite stores. Then the Kona Pet Blanket was actually in Parade magazine. It was a highlight for a Christmas gift, and we have a give back component where we give blankets to shelter dogs also across the nation. And it just hit so many people in such a way that the orders came flooding in, and I didn't have inventory, and I didn't take any of this into consideration. So there I go, driving all over New Jersey.
Oh my
into
goodness.
the ShopRite stores. I had mapped out all of these ShopRite stores, and I spent like 2 days buying back my Kona Pet Blanket at retail price so I can fulfill the orders that had come from Parade magazine, because the last thing I wanted to do was not be able to, to get my customers what they were looking for. And I knew that these were just going to be sitting on a shelf or sitting in the back warehouse, waiting to be sold. I paid retail price. It cost me so much money to go and do that. But these are things that can happen where, where all of a sudden, the response ends up being there and you're like so happy.
Yeah.
So the last slide looks a bit text heavy, but it really does kind of encompass the entrepreneur, the inventor entrepreneur. So if you are the inventor that then becomes the entrepreneur as well, and you're taking on many hats. Remember, I told you not every inventor is an entrepreneur, but if you've chosen that path, you need to think or focus on if you have a purpose, if you're doing it for purpose, passion, or profits. And I shouldn't have put an or there because it can be and. You can have a thriving for-profit company by creating a product that people want and putting it in the hands to serve a need. Sometimes people are very reluctant to say that they are working for profit because everyone needs to have a cause and everyone needs to be doing it for charity or for social good. That's kind of the theme, but it's okay to work for profit. You need to put food on your table. You need to generate profits in order to even put it back in your business to continue to be making things that people need or people want, or to be able to serve, a greater good. But if you don't aspire for those profits, then you're giving it all away, and this is kind of all for naught. So that being the first bullet point is always really important to why you're doing this. And then just, recapping on the last thing about developing your idea, that whole cycle, just produce in small batches. If there's one takeaway, produce in small batches. You can think big, but spend small.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
Yeah.
Think big, spend small. Yep.
And then assess your money, people, and time. Make sure that you're using those resources appropriately, and make sure that you're very fluid and flexible. You don't want to hire 10 people and then not have work for them to do, and yet you've hired them in on salary. So you have to be very conscious of balancing those three things. Do you need to get to market quickly with your product? Then by all means, bring in the troops, but it will cost you money and it might save you time. But think of what your goal is.
Yeah.
And then deciding speed to market versus patent protection. Another aspect that we touched on before, understanding the supply chain, finding the right manufacturer. I know I talked about the manufacturer as the manufacturer, but Finding the right one is super important. And then don't just
Yeah.
find one, find two, find three. Make sure that you are not putting all of your eggs in one basket, and you could be actually but leveraging manufacturer one to get better pricing from manufacturer two. Or if someone's willing to do it for cheaper or for faster or for better quality, you get a feel for who's going to be the best fit for you. But always have more than one in your back pocket. And you don't just find these things out of thin air, by the way. One thing that really helped me, and I touched on it in the very beginning, was I have never been intimidated or afraid to talk to people, to make contacts, to leverage my contacts. So people who I worked with a long time ago, hopefully we're still, on good terms. I never burn bridges, by the way. And I would tap into them and be like, listen, I know that a while back you created, sheets and pillow sets for Burlington Coat Factory. I'm like, would you mind putting me in touch with your manufacturer? Because I just need someone that's reputable. I need someone that's this. And being that I worked in corporate, being that, I had lots of contacts through various other jobs. Besides for corporate, I used to work at an interactive agency. Before that, I used to work here and work there. And I come from a small town. So we're all, if we're not friends with each other and friends with each other's parents, then we're related. Again, it's a small town. Most of us were related. It was awkward for the dating scene. But yeah, so leverage people that you've worked with in the past to even become your mentor or tap into them for conversation. There's so much you can learn from other people's paths and other people's journeys. And for me, I found my manufacturer out of that. And then the next bullet point is sell, sell, sell. Tell your story, overcome your fears. My daughter is in theater. You and I chatted about that offline, but she's been doing theater since she's like 8 years old. And when she gets up on stage, I am so proud of her. Like, one of the most frightening things is public speaking, or even, starting a conversation with someone who you haven't spoken to, or even continuing to carry a conversation. Like, that in itself is a skill as well. And by the way, as a tip, talk less about yourself and ask more questions about the other person. That's a great way to continue the conversation. And then you get a chance to learn, and you get a chance to eat your food and drink your drink because they're busy talking. But her being in theater has really given her the skills to act and to portray someone on stage that you might not be yourself. And I advise all people to take an improv class, take an acting class, because if you're not feeling confident at the moment, channel a character that gives you the confidence. Because if you're acting and you're playing a role, you might be playing a confident person. You might be playing a wheeler and dealer. You might be playing someone who you're not feeling inside at the moment, but you kind of need to manifest them into what you're doing in order to accomplish what you hope to accomplish. But stay authentic. I'm not saying, become a compulsive liar. That must be a very interesting life. But no, stay true to yourself. Stay authentic. But just let that be your catalyst to pushing you in the right direction, to tell your story or to sell your item.
I love that.
And then understand what?
I just said, I love that. I love that thought of, taking on that persona.
Yeah. And it works in every aspect of life. It works in getting along with your friends. It works in, so many different ways, maintaining composure, or it definitely works. And then understand your strengths and weaknesses. So if you are the inventor / entrepreneur, chances are you might be great at selling, but not amazing at keeping the finances, or vice versa. Or, maybe someone else is amazing at email marketing. Just know your strengths and know your weaknesses, most importantly, and see if you can bring someone in to help fill that gap. I used to pay people in flowers and chocolate and wine. So as an entrepreneur, I would need someone to model my product. And if I wasn't modeling it myself, which you may see me and then see me on the packaging and then see me everywhere, because I did do a lot of my own photography. I used the timer. I would take pictures. I would, convince my husband to just do a photo shoot with him behind the camera and me modeling it. And, it's just so humbling and sometimes humiliating and sometimes really cool, because maybe a couple of pictures came out amazing. And I'm like, oh, I'm a model, but I'm not. Yeah, if you have to pay people, it might not cost you that money number up at the top. People might just do it for a hug. They might just do it for a bottle of wine or something that you guys end up sharing later on in the evening time, talking about all the fun you had, taking pictures of each other. And then the last and most important thing is build the mindset of an entrepreneur. Embrace the answer no. Don't necessarily take the answer no right away. So I've been told no many times. There was one time where I went on QVC. It was my first time appearing with the Throwbie, and that was the same day. It was actually the day after a huge storm rocked the Northeast. It was Hurricane Sandy, and it basically had so much of the Northeast underwater. People were without power in the Northeast. It was insane. I had no power here in my own house, yet I was supposed to appear on QVC that next morning. So I ended up going to a hotel that had power near QVC, and I ended up taking a shower and blowing out my hair and then going on air. But it was just such a weird time, to be selling a product when people were devastated and kind of lost their homes. But the way that the answer no came was the product didn't do amazingly in the numbers when they were looking on the back end. They said, I'm sorry, your sales numbers weren't great on air, and we're not going to have the item back. And I was like, whoa, wait. That was during Hurricane Sandy, when much of the Northeast didn't even have access to a television or internet to even buy the product or see the product. I need another shot. I need to be able to have a do-over or, something, because to me, it didn't make sense. But to them, looking at their numbers, they're like, nope, sorry. And I kind of walked away and thought to myself, how could I just accept this no? It wasn't a good no. And I found my way back in. I kind of went over the buyer's head. I called multiple times. I said, I'm in the area. Can I please just come in and meet? I really feel like we need to just do a do-over. And finally, we did put it back on air, and it sold out that first time. It was on with a fantastic host. I was on co-host with her, with a fantastic host. I adore her. And she sold the shit out of the product, and it sold out. And then we just kept going, and, I ordered more, and I was back. So you don't always have to take the no. And my father-in-law used to say, if one door closes, if one door closes, open the window. Yeah. And go in through the window.
I love that, because that really brings to the antithesis what I really hear from you throughout this whole workshop has been that entrepreneurial, inventor, innovative spirit that just keeps pressing forward and just keeps going for that thing that you can visualize and is amazing, and you just want to see that come to fruition, to be able to work through all the different stages of that process of the manufacturing and distribution and all of that, and even running around to all the shop rights. Entrepreneurial life is not always glamorous. It's not always looking at on QVC, bantering with the host, selling out. There's a lot of different steps that lead to that. And really, thank you for sharing that with us. And that was really my heart and vision of this workshop was to show, all of a little bit behind the scenes of, we always talk about how we get to see everyone's highlight reel, but the behind the scenes footage is the stuff where I feel like is the real gold.
Right.
And really, really thankful that you have been able to just carve out this time to speak with us about this and share some of your insights and wisdom in that. And if any of our community would love to get in contact with you or ask you any further questions, how would they be able to do that?
Okay. You know what? I could scooch ahead to the last slide. Anyone can reach me by Jess Mash at Yahoo. I'm sorry. You could do that too, but Jess Mash at konabenelli.com.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Or, yep, the website is konabenelli.com or throby.com. And yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out, ask me any questions. A couple of other takeaways is celebrate the wins. Make sure that you're not putting too much pressure on yourself. Don't wait for something huge in order to celebrate. If you get one step ahead, if you actually got in touch with a buyer, or if you actually had a good phone call securing a manufacturer that you think, celebrate that. Do a happy dance or take a bubble bath. And you don't always have to celebrate with alcohol and champagne and what they do in the movies. You can always celebrate with like getting a good run in or anything like that. And then if you have some setbacks, you can have a pity party, but keep it to a limit. I used to allow myself like 10 minutes for a pity party. And sometimes I'd be cursing. Sometimes I'd be so mad. Sometimes I'd even cry because it didn't work out and I really wanted it to. But if you keep it to 10 minutes and then you're like, okay, what did I learn? A little postmortem, and let's move on and write it down, because you may forget what you learned, or how bad it was and then how good it was and what happened. And then just one last thing, find out how you're motivated. Know yourself. If you're intrinsic or extrinsic, just to define what these things are. Intrinsic motivation happens when you actually you have inner satisfaction. You get enjoyment, there's purpose, there's growth, there's curiosity, passion, self-expression, and fun. All of this happens inside of you, and that's what kind of motivates you to do the things that you want to do, especially when you're motivated to do something that's challenging. You're going to have to pull the motivation out and, the courage from somewhere. So if you're an intrinsic person, sometimes that comes from inside. But if you're an extrinsic person, just know that as well. And if you get your motivation from, listening to podcasts and to get yourself going from an external factor, and you want the pats on the back and the prizes and the perks and the benefits and the social currency, from doing something and accomplishing something, just know who you are and understand who you are, and then fill your cup, fill it up. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself and giving yourself that satisfaction. If you're satisfied externally from other people, or if you're satisfied internally, from praising yourself and feeling that. And don't take yourself too seriously. Laugh at yourself. Laugh at others and laugh at yourself at the same time. And it's very humbling to be an entrepreneur. And I'm so glad that I took this journey. And I try and sometimes make a fool out of myself intentionally just to feel again, And this last slide is just a sketch that I had worked up when I first created the Throby, and how it was going to overtake that other wearable blanket and the benefits that the Throby had. And I used to study art in college, and I used to love to draw. So in my mind, I kind of sketched out where I saw my product and how it made the other one look foolish.
Amazing. Well, thank you again so much. Awesome.
My pleasure.
Okay. Yeah, and there's all your details there, and wow, so much to take in, so much amazing information and just insight. As we said, just discerning this whole
Oh, I should show the product
area.
real quick.
Yes, we would love to see that.
So I don't know what you see, but I'm actually wearing the Roby the entire time. And it is the wearable blanket. And then if you take it off, you do those little snaps in the center, and it's a real blanket again that you can take to other people's houses or on car trips, and you can even wear it how it is on car trips. So I'm sorry, I did so much talking about this whole thing that I had to show it at the very end.
Yes, absolutely. The finished product, the thing that we celebrate with you. So congratulations on all of your success, on all that you've been able to achieve so far. I know that there's going to be many more to come. I can tell that already. So you have that brain that's always going. And just really honored that you've taken the time to share with us all. And so, Jess, thank you. And to our My Social Canvas community, I'm so glad that you were able to be part of it. And we will see you all again soon.
Yes, and if anyone has anything that they would like to ask me or chat about, or they have an idea or a question, or just need a little pep talk or anything, please reach out. I love the fact that you have your group. I love that they're starting young. I hope that they just have patience for making things happen, patience and an open mind to being able to understand the world around them.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for all that you're doing.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Jess.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.